Welcome back to the channel everyone, and thanks for tuning in today, because what we are about to talk about sounds unbelievable at first, but by the end of this deep dive you will understand why a simple looking 1989 Washington quarter dollar has been talked about in collector circles as a coin that could be valued at up to $18 million under the rarest circumstances, and how minting errors, mistakes and extraordinary possibilities can turn a pocket change coin into one of the most valuable modern US coins ever imagined. And as always, this video is meant to educate, inspire curiosity, and help you look twice at the coins you may already have, because history, value and rarity often hide in plain sight, and the 1989 quarter is a perfect example of how modern coins can still shock the numismatic world when everything lines up just right. So let us start by setting the stage, because the Washington quarter has been around since 1932, and by 1989 it was a well-established everyday coin produced in massive quantities by the United States Mint, with the Philadelphia Mint striking hundreds of millions of quarters that year. And under normal circumstances, a circulated 1989 quarter is worth exactly 25 cents, maybe a dollar in high mint state condition, but that is only true for ordinary examples, and the story changes completely when we talk about extreme mint errors, transitional mistakes and one-in-a-kind anomalies that can occur during the minting process. And the reason collectors are willing to pay staggering sums for such coins is because errors are unintentional, they are difficult to replicate, and once discovered they become frozen moments of mint history, representing a failure in a system designed to be precise and controlled. And in the case of the hypothetical $18,001,989 quarter, the value is not based on just one small mistake, but a perfect storm of multiple rare errors combined with provenance, condition and uniqueness that elevates the coin into legendary territory. And to understand this, you need to know how a coin is made, because every stage of production offers opportunities for something to go wrong, starting with the planchet, which is the blank metal disc that will become a coin. And for quarters in 1989, these planchets were supposed to be composed of a copper core sandwiched between two layers of cupronickel, but errors can occur if the wrong metal strip is used, such as a silver planchet leftover from earlier years, or a foreign planchet intended for another country, or even an experimental alloy never meant for circulation. And if a 1989 quarter were struck on a silver planchet, that alone would be extremely rare, because silver quarters were officially discontinued for circulation in 1964, and any genuine silver strike from 1989 would imply a catastrophic error at the mint, involving obsolete or retained materials. And if that silver planchet also had the correct weight and composition matching pre-1965 quarters, it would instantly become one of the most shocking discoveries in modern US coinage. But the value climbs even higher if the coin is not just on the wrong metal, but also exhibits additional striking errors, such as a double die obverse, where the design elements like the lettering date and Washington's profile are visibly double due to a misaligned die during hubbing. And true double dies are some of the most sought after errors, because they are not caused by damage after the fact, but by a mistake in die creation. And a dramatic double die on a 1989 quarter would already be a major rarity, because no such variety is officially recognized in standard references, and collectors pay huge premiums for unlisted or newly discovered double dies, especially when the doubling is strong and easily visible to the naked eye. And then imagine that same coin also showing an off-center strike, where the design is shifted significantly away from the center, leaving part of the coin blank while still retaining a full date, which is critical for value, because off-center coins without dates are far less desirable. And when an off-center strike exceeds 50% and includes the date, it becomes exponentially rarer and more valuable. And now imagine adding a broad strike error to the mix, where the coin was struck without a proper retaining collar, causing it to spread out wider than normal, resulting in a distorted diameter and flattened design elements. And while broad strikes are known, they are rarely seen in combination with off-center strikes and double dies on the same coin, and each additional error multiplies rarity rather than just adding to it, because the likelihood of all these things happening to a single coin is astronomically low, and collectors understand probability, which is why they pay so much for multi-error coins. And the hypothetical $18 million valuation comes into play when we add even more extraordinary factors, such as a wrong mint mark scenario, or rather the absence or presence of a mint mark anomaly, because in 1989 Philadelphia quarters did not carry a mint mark at all. But imagine a 1989 quarter with a clearly defined P mint mark, which was not introduced on quarters until later years. And if such a coin existed, it would suggest a die experiment or a transitional die used incorrectly, and transitional errors are among the most valuable in all of numismatics because they occur when design changes overlap between years or mints, and if a 1989 quarter somehow carried a mint mark style or design element that should not exist until the 1990s, it would represent a breakdown in mint protocol, and transitional errors like the famous 1943 copper cent or 1944 steel cent have sold for hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, and those are single metal errors, so a modern transitional quarter with multiple errors could easily surpass them in theoretical value. And then we must consider the possibility of a mule error, which occurs when two mismatched dies intended for different coins are paired together, such as a quarter obverse with a different denomination reverse, and mules are among the rarest and most famous U.S. errors, like the Sacagawea dollar mule with a Washington quarter obverse which sold for massive sums, and if a 1989 P quarter were discovered with a mismatched reverse, perhaps intended for a foreign coin, a test design, or an experimental reverse, never released to the public, it would instantly become unique because such dies are tightly controlled and their accidental use would be a monumental event, and uniqueness is the ultimate driver of value, because when there is only one known example, collectors are no longer comparing prices, they are competing for ownership, and when wealthy collectors, institutions and museums want the same coin, the price becomes whatever the highest bidder is willing to pay, and that is how valuations reach 8 figures and beyond, and condition plays a crucial role here as well, because even the rarest error loses value if it is heavily worn, damaged or altered, and for a coin to reach $18 million it would need to be in near perfect mint state condition, showing crisp details, original luster, and no signs of circulation, which would suggest it was discovered early, possibly by a mint employee, quality control inspector, or an early roll hunter, and then preserved carefully for decades. And provenance adds another layer, because documented history of discovery, authentication by top grading services and recognition in major numismatic publications all contribute to legitimacy and desirability, and collectors are willing to pay far more for a coin with a clear documented story than for one that appears mysteriously without explanation. And authentication is absolutely essential, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and a coin valued in the millions would undergo intense scrutiny, including metallurgical analysis, die study, weight measurement, and comparison to known minting processes to rule out post-mint alteration or fabrication, and assuming it passes all tests, the coin would be encapsulated and graded by a major service like PCGS or NGC with a special designation noting its unique errors, and that label alone would become famous. And then there is the psychological factor, because coins like this capture imagination, they become symbols of the idea that treasures still exist in everyday places, and that fuels demand not just from collectors but from investors, media outlets, and the general public. And when a coin becomes a headline item, its value can skyrocket beyond traditional numismatic metrics, because it transcends the hobby and becomes a cultural artifact. And the 1989 P quarter is especially compelling because it is modern enough that people can realistically believe one might still be out there in a jar drawer or old collection, and that sense of possibility drives massive interest and speculation. And while no publicly confirmed $18,001,989 P quarter has been sold as of now, the valuation represents a theoretical ceiling based on known prices of similar extreme rarities, and the understanding that the market continues to evolve as wealth increases and competition for top-tier rarities intensifies. And it is important to remember that coin values are not fixed, they are reflections of rarity, demand, condition, and timing, and a coin dismissed today could become tomorrow's legend with a single new discovery. And that is why collectors study errors so intensely, because each error tells a story about how the mint operates and how even the most controlled systems can fail in fascinating ways. And the minting process involves thousands of steps, machines, and human decisions. Next, 1997 P quarter dollar. Today we're diving into a story that sounds unbelievable at first but becomes more intriguing the deeper you go, because this is the tale of how a simple 1997 P quarter dollar could, in theory and under extraordinary circumstances, be worth as much as $17 million, not because it was meant to be rare, not because it was made of gold, but because of a perfect storm of errors, minting mistakes, timing, and the way collectors think about history, uniqueness, and impossibility. And as you listen, keep in mind that this isn't about what the average coin is worth in your pocket, but about how extreme anomalies can transform an ordinary object into something that collectors would consider priceless. And the 1997 P Washington quarter is a perfect canvas for this discussion, because on the surface it is one of the most common modern coins, struck in massive numbers at the Philadelphia Mint during a time when quality control was high and errors were supposed to be rare, which paradoxically makes any genuine error from this period far more exciting than one from earlier decades, because when a mistake slips through a modern system it immediately raises questions about how it happened and how many could possibly exist, and to understand how a $17 million valuation could even be whispered, we need to first appreciate the base coin itself. A clad Washington quarter composed of copper and nickel layers, featuring John Flanagan familiar portrait of George Washington on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse, minted before the state quarters program began in 1999, which means it represents the final years of a long-running classic design, a detail that already gives it historical positioning, and when collectors look back, they often romanticize the last issues of an era, especially when something goes wrong during production. Because errors at the end of a design series can symbolize the closing chaos of a chapter. And the Philadelphia Mint in 1997 produced hundreds of millions of quarters, most of them perfect, functional, and worth exactly face value, but imagine within that ocean of sameness a single coin that should not exist at all, one that combines multiple major mint errors that individually would already command significant premiums, but together would create a numismatic unicorn. And this is where the story shifts from ordinary collecting into the realm of legend, because the hypothetical $17,001,997 p quarter would not be valuable for just one mistake, but for a cascading series of them, starting with the planchet itself, because one of the most dramatic errors a modern coin can have is being struck on the wrong metal, and not just any wrong metal but something that fundamentally contradicts the official record. Such as a quarter struck on a silver planchet decades after silver was removed from circulating coinage, or even more extreme, struck on a gold or experimental alloy planchet never intended for circulation, which would raise immediate red flags and demand metallurgical analysis, and if such a coin were proven to have been struck accidentally on a precious metal blank that somehow remained in the mint from an earlier era or from an experimental batch, the implications would be enormous. Because it would suggest a breakdown in material controls that should have been impossible in 1997, and collectors pay extraordinary premiums for coins that reveal flaws in supposedly flawless systems. And then there is the strike itself, because imagine that same wrong metal planchet being struck not once but multiple times, perhaps with a dramatic off-center strike combined with a broad strike due to a missing collar, causing the coin to expand beyond its normal diameter while still retaining full or partial design details. And then imagine that during this chaotic striking process the dies themselves were misaligned or damaged, resulting in a dramatic double strike or even a triple strike, where parts of Washington's profile appear ghosted or overlapping, creating an almost surreal appearance that looks more like modern art than currency. And such dramatic visual impact is crucial, because high-end collectors are not just buying rarity, they are buying a story they can see with their own eyes. Something that instantly communicates that this object is different from everything else, and the next layer of value comes from die errors. Because if the obverse or reverse die used to strike this hypothetical quarter contained a major hubbing mistake, such as a double die with extreme separation visible in the lettering, date, or motto, then the coin would represent not just a striking error but a die creation error, which means every coin struck from that die would share the mistake. But if only one or two coins were struck before the die was identified and destroyed, then those few survivors would be among the rarest modern double dies known, and collectors place enormous value on first-of-its-kind or last-of-its-kind errors. And then imagine if the date itself, 1997, showed a dramatic anomaly, such as a malformed numeral, a repunched digit, or a misaligned date that suggests the die was improperly prepared, something that again should have been caught during quality checks. And when errors stack like this, wrong metal, multiple strikes, double die characteristics, and date anomalies, the coin begins to transcends standard pricing guides and enters the realm of unique artifacts. And uniqueness is where prices become theoretical rather than practical, because when there is only one known example, there is no true market comparison, only what the wealthiest and most motivated collector is willing to pay. And that's how numbers like $17 million even enter the conversation, because at that level, the coin is no longer competing with other quarters but with paintings, sculptures, and historical documents. And another factor that could push the value into the stratosphere is a mint mark anomaly, because the 1997 P quarter should have a clear P mint mark, but imagine if that mint mark were missing entirely, or doubled, or oddly placed, or even replaced with an entirely different letter due to a die mix-up, such as an S or D mint mark appearing on a coin struck at Philadelphia, which would imply an extraordinary error in die handling, and if that mint mark anomaly were paired with proof-like surfaces or mirror finishes suggesting that a proof die was used accidentally for circulation strikes, the mystery would deepen even further, because proof dies and circulation dies are supposed to be strictly separated, and any crossover represents a systemic failure that collectors find endlessly fascinating. And then there is the concept of transitional errors, which are among the most valuable in all of numismatics, because they occur when a mint is transitioning from one design, composition, or standard to another, and while 1997 itself was not a year of major transition for quarters, it sits right before the monumental change of the state quarters program, and imagine if experimental dies or planchets related to that upcoming program somehow entered production early, resulting in a 1997 P quarter with design elements that hint at the future. Perhaps subtle differences in lettering style, rim thickness, or relief that do not match any known circulation issue. And if such differences could be documented and tied to internal mint experimentation, the coin would become a tangible piece of behind-the-scenes history, something collectors dream of owning because it connects them directly to the decision-making process of the mint, and provenance would play a massive role here as well, because if the coin could be traced back to a mint employee's estate, or discovered in a sealed mint bag, or documented in internal correspondence that later became public, the story would gain credibility and depth, and high-end collectors are willing to pay staggering sums for objects with documented provenance because it reduces uncertainty and enhances prestige, and prestige is a huge driver of price at the top end of any collectible market. And another layer that could justify an extreme valuation is condition, because errors are often poorly struck or damaged. But imagine this 1997 P quarter error surviving in near-perfect or even mint state condition, with crisp details, original luster, and minimal contact marks, which would be astonishing given the chaos required to create the errors in the first place, and condition rarity on top of error rarity multiplies value rather than merely adding to it, because it suggests the coin somehow escaped both the mint's quality control and the wear of circulation, and grading would be crucial, because a top-tier third-party grading service would need to authenticate, attribute, and encapsulate the coin, confirming not only that the errors are genuine but that they occurred at the mint rather than after the fact. And the more complex and layered the errors, the more scrutiny the coin would receive, and surviving that scrutiny would itself become part of the legend, and once certified, the coin would likely be displayed at major coin shows, museums, or private exhibitions, generating buzz and speculation. And buzz is another intangible factor that drives value, because when collectors talk, write articles, and make videos about a single object, it becomes famous within the community, and fame attracts wealthy buyers who want to own something everyone else knows about. And then there is the psychological aspect of round numbers and headlines. Next, 1980 P quarter dollar. Today we have an absolutely fascinating story that will blow your mind and perhaps even make you want to check your own coin collection, because what we're diving into is not just any coin, but a 1980 P quarter dollar that has made headlines and collectors' dreams come true due to its incredible value, reportedly reaching as much as $15 million, and yes, you heard that right, $15 million for a coin that most people might have tossed into a jar or left in circulation without ever realizing its extraordinary significance. And today we're going to explore everything about this coin, from the errors and mistakes that make it so rare, to the theories and possibilities that have collectors and numismatists talking. So buckle up, because this is a deep dive into one of the most intriguing stories in modern numismatics. A tale of how something as small and seemingly mundane as a quarter can suddenly become a treasure worth millions and turn ordinary people into instant millionaires if they were lucky enough to find one. And to start, let's think about the year 1980, a time when the United States was experiencing a lot of economic changes. The coins themselves were mass-produced at the Philadelphia Mint, designated with a small P mint mark, and while millions of quarters were struck that year and entered circulation, a tiny number of these coins ended up having mistakes during the minting process that made them extraordinarily rare. And when we say mistakes, we're talking about errors that could range from misaligned dies to double strikes, off-center strikes, and even planchet anomalies, all of which in the numismatic world are incredibly important because they create uniqueness in coins that would otherwise be ordinary. And in the case of the 1980p quarter, collectors have identified several specific types of errors that can drastically increase the value, with some being more subtle than others, such as double dies, where the design elements on the coin appear to be stamped twice, creating a shadow or overlapping effect on features like Washington's profile, the lettering, or the eagle on the reverse side, and this type of error occurs when the die itself is impressed twice during preparation. And even a slight misalignment can create a dramatic visual effect that is highly prized in the collector market because it is extremely rare and difficult to replicate, while other errors include off-center strikes, which happen when the coin is not properly aligned in the coining press, and as a result, part of the design is missing or cropped, which can range from a minor offset to a dramatic shift where half of the coin may show nothing but blank planchet. And believe it or not, the more extreme the off-center strike, the more valuable the coin can become, especially when combined with other anomalies. And then there are planchet errors, which occur when the metal disc itself is flawed before striking, such as having cracks, laminations, or even wrong metal composition, all of which can create fascinating and unique appearances that collectors can't resist. And the 1980p quarter has been known to feature some of these rare planchet issues, which might include thin spots, lamination splits, or even small voids, making each coin distinct from every other quarter minted in that year. And when we combine these possibilities, the 1980p quarter becomes a coin that is not just valuable because of its age or condition, but because it has one or more of these extremely rare errors. And this is where the astronomical valuation comes in, because when a coin like this is verified by professional grading services and authenticated as having a major error, it can literally be worth millions. And the reason why this particular quarter has been quoted at $15 million in some discussions is due to a combination of extreme rarity, the magnitude of the error, historical significance, and the intense demand from private collectors and investors who understand that coins with such anomalies are essentially unique pieces of art that carry a story, a history, and an element of mystery that can never be perfectly reproduced. And speaking of rarity, the actual number of 1980p quarters with such major errors is incredibly small, likely only a handful in existence, which adds to the feverish excitement among collectors, because while there may be thousands of 1980p quarters with minor imperfections, the ones with strikingly obvious, dramatic errors like severe off-center strikes or significant die doubling are extremely rare. And some of the most famous examples have been documented with photographs that show Washington's head appearing almost as if it is floating or duplicated, or the reverse eagle design being doubled or shifted. And even experts in the field of numismatics have been captivated by these coins, discussing them at conventions, in journals, and online forums, because every detail matters, from the precise location of the error to how it affects the overall appearance and balance of the coin. And then we must consider the psychology of collectors and investors, because the value of coins is not just about metal content or face value, but about rarity, uniqueness, provenance, and the story attached to it. And the 1980p quarter with errors fits this perfectly because it has a story that is easy to understand yet incredibly compelling. A coin meant for everyday use accidentally became one of the rarest objects in the world, and this creates a sense of allure and urgency for anyone who might even think they have one in their possession, because suddenly a coin that is normally worth 25 cents could, in theory, be worth millions. And when you think about it, that is exactly what drives the fascination and the excitement in the collector community, because who doesn't love the idea that something ordinary could hold extraordinary value if it has the right combination of mistakes, misalignments, and rarity? And furthermore, the possibilities for such a coin to exist in someone's pocket today are endless, given that coins from 1980 were widely circulated and many may have been lost, damaged, or stored away without anyone realizing what they had. And this introduces an element of treasure hunting into the modern world, where a teenager, a casual collector, or even someone cleaning out an old piggy bank could stumble upon a coin that could change their life. And it's not just hype, because historical sales of rare error coins have shown that people are willing to pay astronomical amounts to acquire them, especially when they are verified by trusted grading services like PCGS or NGC, and these coins are often displayed in private collections, museums, or auctioned for incredible sums, which further fuels the fascination. And in terms of the specific errors that make the 1980p quarter so valuable, collectors often point to severe die cracks, double die obverse, missing mint marks, and unusual planchet shapes as the most significant, with some coins even combining multiple errors into a single specimen, which makes them even more unique and coveted. And there is also the theory that coins with certain errors are statistically more likely to appear in circulation in a certain way, which makes finding one a combination of luck, timing, and keen observation, and this is part of why the 1980p quarter is so iconic, because it represents both a tangible piece of American history and a near-mystical object in the world of collectibles, where each tiny imperfection can translate into millions of dollars, and collectors often study these coins under magnification to identify subtle anomalies in the lettering, the edge, or the relief of Washington's profile, because even the smallest clue can indicate a rare variety. And then there's the human element, because stories abound of people finding error coins in change, sometimes with life-changing consequences, and the 1980p quarter is now part of that lore, standing as a prime example of how errors in minting can turn an everyday object into a legend. And as we think about the sheer magnitude of the value, $15 million is not just a number, it represents an almost unimaginable level of interest and desirability, fueled by rarity, condition, historical significance, and the dramatic nature of the errors themselves. And it also shows how numismatics blend science, art, history, and psychology into a single object, because every coin tells a story about the moment it was made, the people who made it, the technology used to strike it, and the journey it has taken since. And for the 1980p quarter, that journey is especially remarkable because it has transformed from a simple quarter into a legendary item that collectors and historians talk about with awe, excitement, and a touch of disbelief. Because the probability of such a coin surviving in perfect condition, with all its errors intact and properly authenticated, is extraordinarily low, and yet it has happened, which fuels not just the monetary value but the emotional and cultural significance as well. And when we imagine the errors themselves, it is fascinating to think about how a tiny misalignment in a press, a slight misfeed of a planchet, or a subtle double strike can result in a coin that is worth millions, turning a manufacturing mistake into a treasure, which is why coin collectors and enthusiasts pay such close attention to the details, using magnifying lenses, grading equipment, and databases to catalog every variety and error, because understanding these nuances is what separates a common coin from a world record-breaking one. And the 1980p quarter. Last 1988d quarter dollar. Today on this incredible journey into the world of coins, rare collectibles, and the fascinating universe of numismatics, because what we are going to explore today is not just any ordinary coin, but a truly remarkable 1988d quarter dollar. A coin that has captured the imaginations of collectors and investors alike due to its extraordinary rarity and the mind-blowing valuation of $13 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $13 million for a single quarter that, in normal circumstances, would be worth exactly 25 cents, and today we are going to dive deep into the reasons why this coin is so valuable, examining the errors and mistakes that make it unique, the possibilities for how it might be found, and why collectors around the world consider it one of the most exciting and coveted coins ever minted. So let's start with some context, because understanding the significance of the 1988d quarter requires us to look at the time and place of its production. The United States in the late 1980s, a period when coin production was high, millions of quarters were struck at the Denver Mint, designated with a small d mint mark, and most of these coins entered circulation without incident, but occasionally, errors would slip through the minting process, creating coins that were dramatically different from the standard issues. And these anomalies are what make the 1988d quarter so extraordinary, because in the vast universe of coin collecting, mistakes like double dies, off-center strikes, missing mint marks, clipped planchets, and other manufacturing errors can instantly turn an otherwise ordinary coin into a rare gem. And when we talk about double dies, for instance, we're referring to a situation where the design is stamped more than once on the coin due to an issue with the die itself, resulting in a shadowed or doubled image on elements such as George Washington's profile, the lettering on the obverse or reverse, or even the eagle design, and such doubling can range from subtle to dramatic, with the most pronounced examples being incredibly valuable because they are extremely difficult to find and impossible to reproduce artificially without sophisticated equipment. And then there are off-center strikes, which happen when the coin is not properly aligned in the press during striking, leading to portions of the design being missing or shifted, and in extreme cases, the coin may appear almost like a half-quarter with blank metal covering one side, and this is exactly the kind of error that collectors look for because it transforms a common coin into something truly unique, something that stands out in any collection, and the 1988 D-quarter has been known to feature some of these severe off-center strikes, which combined with other anomalies, creates coins that are virtually irreplaceable. And beyond off-center strikes, there are also planchet errors, which occur when the metal disc used for the coin has issues before it is struck, such as cracks, laminations, wrong metal composition, or unusual shapes, and these imperfections can create fascinating visual effects and further increase the rarity and value of the coin. And some of the most famous 1988 D-quarters with massive value exhibit combinations of multiple errors, such as a double die obverse paired with a clipped planchet or an off-center strike, which makes them exceptionally rare and highly sought after in the collector market. And speaking of rarity, it is important to understand just how few of these coins exist, because while millions of quarters were minted in 1988, only a tiny fraction carry the dramatic errors that elevate them from everyday change to multi-million-dollar treasures. And the fact that the 1988 D-quarter has been valued at $13 million is a direct result of its rarity, the severity of its errors, and the immense interest from both private collectors and professional investors who recognize that coins like this are not only monetary assets but also historical artifacts, blending art, science, and history in a single object. And when we examine the errors more closely, one of the most significant categories includes severe die cracks, which are literally cracks in the die that transfer to the coin as raised lines or fissures, and these cracks can occur anywhere on the coin, sometimes forming intricate patterns that are mesmerizing to look at. And the more dramatic or unusual the pattern, the higher the value, because it indicates a truly rare minting anomaly. And another critical error type is the missing or misplaced mint mark, which can occur due to issues with the mint mark punch or during the die preparation process, and in some cases, coins with missing D mint marks are considered highly collectible, especially when combined with other errors, because the coin essentially becomes a one-of-a-kind specimen that was never intended to exist. And this plays into the broader psychology of coin collecting, because rarity and uniqueness are what drive interest, value, and ultimately, the astronomical prices that can be reached in auctions, where verified error coins often sell for hundreds of thousands, millions, or even tens of millions of dollars. And the 1988 D-quarter is a perfect example of this phenomenon, demonstrating how a small manufacturing mistake can transform a common object into a historical artifact of immense value. And then there is the phenomenon of double die errors, which in some 1988 D-quarters are so dramatic that lettering appears thickened or shadowed, sometimes creating the illusion of movement or depth, and experts in numismatics spend hours examining these coins under magnification, noting minute details in the letter spacing, the contours of George Washington's profile, and the lines of the eagle on the reverse side, because even small clues can distinguish a rare, high-value error coin from a more common minor flaw. And combined with severe off-center strikes or planchet anomalies, these features make each coin essentially a unique work of art, something that cannot be exactly replicated and therefore holds incredible appeal to collectors, investors, and enthusiasts. And when we consider the possibilities for finding such a coin today, it is thrilling to imagine. Because while most coins from 1988 have been circulated and collected over the past 3.5 decades, the potential remains that an extraordinary 1988 D-quarter could still be hidden in a jar, a drawer, or even in change, waiting to be discovered. And this element of chance adds a layer of excitement that is hard to match in any other collecting hobby, because anyone could, in theory, stumble upon a coin that could change their life, a coin that in the right condition and with the right errors, is worth millions. And this is not mere speculation, as history has shown with numerous high-profile sales of rare error coins, where collectors have paid extraordinary sums to acquire a coin that exhibits unique mistakes, historical significance, or extreme rarity, and in some cases, the provenance of the coin, including documentation of its history, prior ownership, and authentication by trusted grading services like PCGS or NGC, can further increase its value, ensuring that coins like the 1988 D-quarter achieve almost legendary status in the numismatic world. And the story of this coin is fascinating not only because of its errors, but also because it highlights the intricacies and challenges of coin production at the Denver Mint, where even a highly automated and precise system can still produce anomalies due to human oversight, mechanical shifts, or material imperfections, and these anomalies, which might have been considered mistakes in ordinary circumstances, are what create such extraordinary collectibles, and the market dynamics for these coins are equally fascinating. Because collectors often compete fiercely for the rarest examples, driving up prices through auctions, private sales, and competitive bidding, which is exactly why a coin like the 1988 D-quarter with major errors can reach valuations in the tens of millions, as collectors recognize the rarity, historical importance, and investment potential of owning a coin that is essentially one of a kind. And the excitement does not stop there, because enthusiasts love to study the coin under magnification, exploring every ridge, letter, and relief, looking for subtle anomalies, micro-scratches, and patterns in the metal that could indicate a rare die crack, doubling, or planchet imperfection, and these minute details often determine whether a coin is classified as a standard issue, a minor error, or a record-breaking rarity, and in the case of the 1988 D-quarter, the combination of severe errors makes it particularly captivating because it represents a coin that is both visually striking and historically significant, and it also demonstrates the unpredictability of the coin collecting market, because while most coins lose value over time, those with major errors can appreciate exponentially, creating opportunities for collectors and investors to achieve unprecedented returns. And when we consider the possibilities of how such a coin could be found today, it is almost like a modern-day treasure hunt, because despite decades of circulation, coins with severe errors can surface unexpectedly in change, in old collections, or even in rolls purchased from banks, and the thrill of discovering a coin that could be worth millions is part of the enduring allure of numismatics, and it is why collectors meticulously study each coin.